Welcome to Grow with Purpose. This is the Axiom podcast where we talk about the work that advisors like Mike LoBue, who's in the studio today. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about the work Mike does every single day. And one of the great core competencies brought to our team is leadership development.
Oh.
And a few weeks ago, Mike coined this concept that we've started using quite a bit called From Laborers to Leaders. And so we've done 2 episodes already. This is the third of a 3-part episode. So, Mike, just kind of recap what we've covered in the first 2 episodes and how that tees up today's topic.
Well, every business owner has people in their organization that they can raise up to be leaders. But a lot of these people are very highly productive workers, and they need to almost transition them from the field into helping manage the field, into eventually hopefully helping them run the company. You know, that's that transition. It's those 3 steps there. All of them are different. Mm-hmm. All of them are a gamble if they're not getting help and they've never done it before. So all of these things are really, really important. And once you get the guy or gal out of the field or out of the cubicle and you start moving them over, now all of a sudden they need different skill sets and they need to think differently. They need to be able to make better decisions in their new role, interact with people differently in their new role, and they have to adapt. And what we're going to talk about today, which I was really excited about this podcast, is we're going to talk about action items that people can do and things that we can help these transitioning leaders do to help them see themselves differently, think differently, and act and do a good job.
Yeah. And you used a word there that you spent some time on in a previous podcast, gamble. And that's what we see a lot, unfortunately. And it's funny because there are some cavalier business owners out there that probably gamble a lot. They don't tend to stay in business, so they're not our clients. A lot of our clients they want to grow. They've done a lot of things right. They're trying to get to the next level, realize what got you here won't get you there. And that's usually where we start to have a relationship. And they don't gamble in any other area of their business.
Yeah.
But we consistently see this, what you and I, like, man, it just feels like a roll of the dice in terms of whether this person's going to be successful or not.
Yep.
And why would you do that? And to their, to be, show grace, it's like growing leaders is not what they've done for 30 years. It's, the businesses that we're talking about are at a point where getting to the next level really depends on a lot more of the weight of growth being born, all the weight of the company growing, being on the leadership team, not the owner. And so it shouldn't be surprising. I think if you're listening to this as a business owner and, that's like, oof, that's bad. It's normal. Like, you're all going through the same thing together to try to grow a business. So if we can comfort you a little bit in terms of saying it's okay, that you realize it's not okay to continue. So the previous 2 episodes, that's kind of been our theme of like, this is something that is entirely fixable. It's the reason that, going back even another episode, it's the whole reason that Axiom had to start doing leadership and professional development, because you really can't grow a business for very long without it. You can get some short-term gains. So when we talk about growing leaders, we've talked about the cost of not managing the transition well. We've talked about the leadership mindset in the last episode and how you think about it and how you talk to yourself about it and how you can manage that change. Now we're talking about what do leaders do that's different than what the production, all-star did.
Yeah.
So where do we start? What are some of the hallmarks of leadership activities that speak to that?
Well, let's start with what I believe the problem is. The problem is that the business owner started, and then at some point they got their organization big enough that they had to start doing admin and start doing all these things. And they, at this point, have figured that part out. Even if it's ugly, they have somehow gotten their organization to a certain size that they've had to figure out. And their mentality goes, I need to grab this guy from the field, and I expect him to adapt like I did. But you said on the last podcast, Joey, you're the 1% of the 1% of the 1%.
Yeah.
And you expect this guy or this gal to be able to adapt like you did, or have the diligence that you did, the focus that you did. You probably work in 16-hour days. The people aren't, well, there's not everyone's willing to do that.
Yeah. If they are willing to do that, they're probably going to leave you and go start their own company.
Either be your competitor.
Yeah.
So, but the fact is that I called it a gamble because gamble's not planned. Gamble is just, man, I hope this works, instead of planning. And successful strategic planning is at the core of everything that we do, because when we go into partner with someone, we go, oh, you can plan for this. You can strategically select this person. You can actually make an entire roadmap for what they need to accomplish and where they need to be by a certain time. Oh, really? You can do that? Oh, well, I can. And they do it every day when they train people out in the field, but they have no idea how to do it when they're transitioning leaders. And that is unbelievably important. We were, you and I were at an establishment a couple weeks ago, and we were sitting down with the business owner that was going to potentially partner with Axiom. We were asking a bunch of questions. You're sitting there with your notebook and you're asking him question after question after question. And he's talking about, I have to develop some leaders. I got to develop some leaders. I have this guy. He's my top guy. He's this, he's that. And, he's really good at what we do here. He's also really good with the guys. He's really good with this. He's really good with that. And I said, wow, this guy seems like this guy can be on it. Like, wow, we can start to, I'm already in my head. I'm like, okay, who can we develop? Who can we equip? Who can we, and then in the middle of us talking, the door, I hear the door creak next to us, and I look over, and there's some scruffy dude there in a dirty t-shirt, dirty pants, and his beard's all over the place. His hair is in his beard's in his hair. He's a mess. And I go, did this guy just come off the street? What's going on here? And then he just closes the door without saying anything, walks away. And I go, that was awkward. And I go, well, who's that? He goes, oh, that's him. And I go, what? So this is the guy that they're about to hand all this responsibility to. And I say, man, he needs help.
Yeah.
This business owner needs help.
We see where this is going. We've seen this movie before.
Yes.
And this is not going to end well.
Exactly.
Because there's a presumption that, well, he's good at what he's doing now, so he'll naturally be good at this next thing.
Yes. So one of the, I want to let's talk through a couple concepts and a couple ideas that people can start doing, or as the business owner, you can lay out a roadmap with your employee that you're raising up, that you're equipping, and saying, okay, here are some of the areas that we're going to need to tidy up a little bit, because you have to change the way you think. You have to change the way that you look at yourself. It's really, really important. So a lot of times, remember, when they're out in the field, they're being told what to do.
Yeah.
Here is your schedule. This truck needs to be at this house at 9 a.m. and you're starting, or 6 a.m. or you're burning daylight. That's the conversation that they're having. Now, as they step into this new role, they have to start to manage their own time. They have to manage not only their own time, they have to manage a crew's time. So teaching them about time and task management is really, really important, because we talked about this, I think, 2 podcasts ago, where how come this guy's phone's ringing 16 times? I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and they said that I moved into a role and I am the one that needs to answer the phone and make sure that the technicians are getting what they need. But 3 to 5 of the technicians that we have still call over me to their old boss, who's still their boss in the chain of command, but I'm the one that they need to come to. And this guy has been brought in, and he's helping train the big boss to say, no, don't answer the phone. Yeah. Tell them to call me, because I'm the one that's in my job blueprint. That's my responsibility now. And I need to teach these guys to start. Why? Because it's now time and task management. As you go up the chain, it changes. So we need to start delegating some of these tasks. And we also need to teach this new leader, here is what is important that you need to do. And if this happens, this urgent thing that comes up, you don't need to handle that right now. Your technician, we need to start doing some classes to equip them so that they don't have to call you all the time. So it's these conversations about, why do you spend your time the way that you do? Because that is going to be really important for them actually being able to do their job. Yeah,
and I think what we see oftentimes is, like you were saying, they've been told what to do, and I'll say there's a very few. They usually have had leadership experience somewhere else, or they're coming in from the outside, and they decide what they need to do. They decide what they need to get done that day.
Yeah.
But for those who are being promoted internally, that's usually not the case. They've been being told what to do. They're used to being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem is they don't know what they're supposed to do in this new leadership role. And we do them a disservice in the business because somebody steps in to fill the vacuum to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And the core skill set they need to learn is how to decide what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
So every day we think we're helping them. Well, why don't you go do a listening tour, right? Which is, it's a great idea. You're moving into a new leadership role. Maybe you need to interface with other department heads you've never known before. Maybe you need to get leveled up in your accounting knowledge to start reading the reports that are now your responsibility.
Yeah.
And so be like, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you go spend time with accounting, or why don't you spend some time with customer service, or why don't you do that? And it's well intentioned. It's also like survival, because it's like, well, as the CEO, I don't want to feel like I've made a mistake. And this person, if they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs all day, that's going to look bad on me. I picked the wrong person. So I'm going to decide, and continue to give them. And the muscle that's atrophying that you don't even realize is the one that allows them to decide what they're supposed to do every day. And I remember, I think it was Charles Schwab that went to work for Carnegie. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But that the note card, there's a story about him pulling the note card out of his pocket during a tour of the factory or something, and it had the 3 things that he was going to get done that day.
Yeah.
And if there's nothing else that you do in terms of time and task management, is deciding as the leader of whatever group, what are the 3 things that as a leader I need to accomplish for this group today?
Yeah.
And something as simple as that, I would say 90% of the people who get promoted into leadership teams don't realize that that is something that they can do.
Yeah.
Because again, to your point, they're used to being told what are the 3 things that I have to get done today.
Yeah. So, we talk about extreme ownership a lot by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, but they talk about prioritize and execute. So you have to be able to prioritize what you need to do that day and execute properly. And what I love about when we come in and come alongside a company, we help build these job blueprints, and these job blueprints have the KPIs already built in. So when I'm sitting down with this guy that's transitioning, I'm telling him, hey, here is your job blueprint. Here's what you're responsible for. Here are the measurable key performance indicators that you're going to need to hit so that you can do a good job. Mm-hmm. So he's not wondering I have to do this. Well, what are you going to need to do a better job here? Right. So I think that having that blueprint helps them make those priorities. Shifting gears along the way. I was having a conversation with someone the other day. They were talking about how there's a guy that works in sales. He's front facing and he's in there with the clients, but he's not wearing the uniform. He's not wearing the shirt. He's not presenting himself appropriately and having the brand of the company. So the story that I started with, if that leader, if we're going to develop that leader, is he client facing? Okay. Now, I always hear the argument, I don't care what other people think. I don't care. But listen, if you're a front facing employee that's going to be representing the company, you should care. You should care. You should absolutely care, and I understand that you feel that way. That's fine. But here's what I found. If you want to make more money and you want to be more successful, look the part. Yeah. Look the part, So I heard this great story the other day. So I was having a conversation with one of the leadership team, and he was explaining to me how they had hired this young guy, and they were worried. He was worried. He's like, I think I made a bad hire. He's a little bit quieter. He's not as engaged. Like these guys, they're in the trades. They'll rub each other the wrong way. They'll say stuff. He's just a little bit quieter demeanor, and he was a little bit worried about him. And he said he got to work and he was working, and he's in a trade. He's working with his hands, and he's got these big dreadlocks. He's got big dreadlocks, and obviously, at some point, it's interfering with what he has to do during the day. So he's either got to, put him back or whatever. But he said a couple weeks later, he said the kid, he was trying really hard. He was working hard. He was studying. He was getting really good at his job. And all of a sudden one day he comes in and he's got his hair cut. No one told him. No one told him to cut his hair. No one told him, but he felt more presentable. And the cool part about that story is there was another guy that was also training that apparently had a great looking mullet. He had a mullet, straight up mullet. And he saw the decision that the other young guy made. And 2 days later, he came into work with his haircut because he felt like he was more presentable. And I'm like, man, these guys are making good decisions, not because anyone's pressuring them, not because anyone said, hey, you can't have your hair like that, but they felt more presentable. Now, these guys aren't working in sales. If you're working in sales, I believe if you're talking to clients every day, you shouldn't be thinking about how do I like to look. You should be thinking about how do clients like me to look? How should I be presentable? Should I have dirt all in my nails? Should I brush my teeth that day? You know, these soft skills, you know, it's going to be really hard to sell something if the person can tell you what you had for lunch. You know what I mean? Yeah. These things are all things that are important that most people don't talk about.
You talked about extreme ownership, which is probably one of our favorite, books to introduce new leaders to, because it really goes to how you think and how you act, how this should show up.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned sales. I think sales guys, they're extreme owners for one reason. It affects their commission.
Absolutely.
It affects their compensation. We heard another story. It's become one of my favorites. I think I've told it a few times at one of our clients a few weeks ago, where they were talking about, do we need a policy for tattoos? Because this new person has a lot of tattoos. They're going to be sitting at the front desk. And one of the owners of the company, he said, well, it's funny, we never had this issue with sales. And one of our best salesmen of all time had tattoos up and down both arms. And he just always wore a long sleeve, like compression shirt underneath his work shirt, his company logo shirt, because he knew he was going to sell more.
Yeah.
If the tattoos weren't an issue for, maybe they're only an issue for 10% of the people, but for him, that's 10% of the sales that he's just not going to get no matter how good he presents. So we see that there are kind of these pockets where it's very easy to take ownership because there's a direct impact to me.
Absolutely.
And now when we move into these leadership positions, encouraging leaders to say, okay, you're not sitting in front of a customer, but you are. Now the person who matters most, let's say you used to be in sales, the person who mattered most was the customer. Now you're in your leadership position. The person who matters most is the salesperson, because you're now the sales manager. Or we used to have to, I used to have to dress a certain way because people would come into the office and I was in a customer support role and I would have to meet with people. So I had to be professionally dressed and all that. And I don't have to do that anymore because I'm a customer service manager. Well, you don't have to do that, but you do have to be mindful of your customers now or all the other customer service reps.
Absolutely.
So how am I showing up? How am I going to own the way that I show up? So that it has the best beneficial outcome. And a lot of times that is just like not creating problems for yourself. And part of this is, the way you, like, if you're a sales manager and you expect everybody to wear the company logoed shirt and you decide with my, new position, I'm going to go out and, I like to wear suits. I'm going to wear a suit every day. And not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent, but it's a lot easier to get a guy to wear his shirt. I think it goes the opposite direction. I'm a sales manager now, so I'm just going to wear the polos that I want to wear because I don't have to go see customers. And it becomes a lot more difficult to hold guys accountable to, what's the expectation. And I think the best companies, they don't need a dress code because there's a standard set by leadership. And everybody just knows I'm going to do better because they're communicating, they're signaling to me how I'm going to do best. And so I'm going to follow that counsel.
People do what people see. People do what people see. The other piece about this is, it's communication. Because I've been out, like I said, my dad's an electrician. I've been out in an environment around carpenters, around electricians, around plumbers, okay? And it's not, sometimes there's some colorful language. There's some colorful stories, all things that we hear that maybe as you step into this leadership position, maybe you might want to kind of tone it down a little bit. I was interviewing someone the other day, great resume, great experience, great, lot of really, really good things. But as I'm talking, they're dropping F-bombs over here and they're doing this over here. And I said, that might be fine around your crew, but I'm not your crew. I'm looking for a very specific type of culture fit. And if you're dropping F-bombs, it's not going to fly over here. And it also tells me that he doesn't really respect the meeting, if that makes sense. So, and people they just almost do it out of habit, and they don't understand how they're coming off. Because remember, we're putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, because now we're leaders. When we're out in the field, we're just trying to do a job. Although you're going into someone's house, very likely. You're going into someone's house. How are you talking? What if there are kids around? How are you presenting yourself in your communication? How are you presenting yourself? Are you looking people in the eye? I have this whole thing about look people in the eye when you tell them. I teach our kids, look them in the eye and ask them what their name is. Like, it's very, very simple. Here's how you shake someone's hand. All of these things are really important. These are soft skills, but some guy that's looking at the ground while he's talking to you and mumbling over his words or using cuss words when he's talking, like, it doesn't give the vibes that you want him back in your house. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's your counsel to folks like that? Is it just like, hey, what I want you to do is just pay more attention to the way other people in this new leadership environment communicate, the words that they use? Like, let's put our antenna up and just get a sense for the environment, and let's try to adopt some of the best practices in that environment as opposed to what we're used to.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. Number one, when you change your association, you change. When you change your association, when you're around people that are all doing the same stuff, you'll do it. But when you're around people and you're all of a sudden the words you're using aren't what you're using, and you see how they respond to you, you go, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that again, right? So the association, that really does matter. The other part that I challenge people to, when you want to have a habit that you want to change, let's say I want to spend less money. Get a little notebook, and every time you spend $1, you write it down, okay? Trust me, you'll spend less money because you're aware, and you're making yourself aware. So get a notebook, and every time you say a curse word, you write it down. I want to know how many times you curse per day. Put it down. All of a sudden, you go, I need to. So you have to make yourself aware of the habit first, and then you have to adjust. You have to be able to make some adjustments. It's not going to be easy because it's a habit that you've had for X amount of time. And you may feel like you relate to the guys or gals better when you talk like this, but that's not who you are anymore. You have to become this new leader, and it's in you, but you're going to have to adjust some of these habits.
What are some of the other things that you see leaders or you're working with leaders to change in terms of the things they're doing?
I mean, kind of what we referred back to this in the second part of this podcast, but I think learning and educating yourself is extremely important. We talked about listening to podcasts. We talked about reading books. We talked about the technical skills when you first get started are 80% of your job. Now, as you step into management, the technical skills are 50%. What's the other 50%? Working with people. Are you reading books that are going to help you work with people? Are you listening to things that are going to help you work with the people that you're working with? Are you reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Are you reading How to Win Friends and Influence People? These things are going to help you be better with people. Those are tools, and that you need to plan time ahead, whether you're on the way to work, when you're listening to these podcasts, or whether you're at home at night reading these books, and then thinking about action items the next day. Hey, I read in How to Win Friends and Influence People that I should probably smile. Okay? I'm a trucker. What do I have to smile about, Right. But listen, people will respond to you better when you're smiling. And it's free. It doesn't cost you any money. It's not gonna change the bottom line because you smiled, but it's probably gonna actually increase the bottom line because you're smiling, right? So these little things, but you have to be able to learn more and then apply it.
Yeah, I learned how to read in college. I learned how to read in grade school, but you know what I mean. That's when I kind of started to, I was expected to read a lot. Just the assignments were monuments, right? Yep. So one of the first things I did was find a book in the library on how to speed read. And I just was able to increase my comprehension and read faster. And it was really just to get through assignments. But then, I started to pick up a few books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Power of Positive Thinking, what kind of traditional self-help genre, working on yourself, and then a lot of nonfiction books, theology, doctrine, and I just fell in love with it. and I've took it for granted that I love to read. That's one of the best Sunday afternoon for me is plowing through 10, 12 chapters in the latest book that I'm reading.
Yeah.
But I've learned not everybody has that experience, whether it was college that did that or just I used to also sit down and just thumb through the encyclopedias at my grandma's house because I was curious about stuff. So that's a kind of an idiosyncrasy, maybe.
Yeah.
I think you share it, by the way. So it's that one of the reasons we have great conversations about the stuff that we're learning.
Yeah.
But what's so cool is to see somebody who's in their 30s or 40s promoted into a leadership position, and we put a book in their hands like Extreme Ownership that's just chock full of great leadership lessons, and it's also super engaging. Or Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, another great book that's just so dense with great leadership principles. Anything from John Maxwell, right? And you see them just like almost this whole world literally opens up of resources that they are not dependent on somebody else to feed them. They can start feeding themselves.
Yeah.
And I do realize that whether it's from, learning disabilities like dyslexia or just that they've never learned to read well and it's slow and it's arduous and comprehension's tough. There's other mediums, there's podcasts, there's audiobooks, there's seminars, there's things they can go to. And I would encourage everybody, like find the medium. If this is an area you struggle with, find the medium that is the easiest for you to get started. But I would really encourage you to get to have your goal be to the place where I can be widely and deeply read. I don't think there's any substitute for it. There's the cliche, I don't know who came up with it, but leaders are readers.
Yes.
And there's something about being able to digest long form thought that's over 200 or 300 pages where the idea is fully blown out and you've parked on a certain principle or habit or practice long enough that it has a chance to take root.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I appreciate you is that I know you're always investing in yourself. Yeah. And I've seen it's a fair number of clients that are in the skilled trade space, guys who fit to the description to a T that we've been talking about. They were once in a truck, they were once on a job site, and now they're doing the estimates or they're supervising whole departments or divisions. And it's just so cool to see, like, they're telling me, hey, I know you liked Extreme Ownership. Have you checked this book out yet?
Yep.
Or this is a classic. I'm reading this for the third time through, and I think I might read it once a year.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, these are guys that 10 years ago would say, the last time I read a book was high school and I never finished it.
Yep.
So it is a fundamental skill set I think every leader ought to invest in.
Yeah. They still haven't finished Catcher in the Rye. Okay. So I tried. I understand.
Dostoevsky. I'm still still on my list.
Yeah.
I'm about 2/3 of the way through, but
I understand. I understand. Talking about extreme ownership, there's a concept in extreme ownership that talks about leading up the chain of command. So I was with someone the other day. I was with a member of a leadership team, was having a conversation, and he told me a story about years ago. There was an issue that happened over a weekend where there was a job site that they were on. Something went wrong at the job site. He didn't hear about it, although he was in charge of the job site, until Monday. So he gets there on Monday, and his boss and the boss's boss were flipping out. They were flipping out. They were using all sorts of encouraging language, and then this leader just goes, "Hey, what are you talking about? I have no concept of what you're talking about." And then once this leader had all of the facts, he kind of laid it out and said, "No, this wasn't us. This person didn't show up. This was another subcontractor that was supposed to do this, and this. They didn't do this, so therefore this broke. This is actually not even our fault." And everyone was like, "Oh." And he said, "If this ever happens again, before you do anything, come to me and let me go out and do the fact finding before we jump to conclusions." He talked to his boss like that. He talked to his boss's boss like that. Yes, it's called leading up the chain of command. He needed to assert himself and saying, "Hey, this is my job. And if I have all the correct pieces, I can do my job well, but I can't have you meddling in my stuff or blaming me for things that I already did work on Friday to make sure that what you're talking about didn't happen." And if you had asked me or picked up the phone, I would have told you I did these 5 things to prepare for this not happening. And all of our precautions were in place, but you're overreacting. And you shouldn't be treating me like this. And that leader is now in a much higher position in the company because when he did that, he not only did a good job and proved to himself, because listen, you got to stand up for yourself. You know, he wasn't just going to let people walk all over him. He also proved himself to his boss and the boss's boss because he said, hey, this is a leader. He did a good job. And then later down the road, when someone needed to step into that next position, it was obvious who they were going to choose because when he did that, they actually developed some respect for him. They said, okay, all right. And I remember he told me that each of those people came and apologized to him. And they said, hey, I handled that inappropriately. I appreciate you bringing what you needed to bring to the table and being straightforward with us.
Yeah. Well, this idea you talked about from extreme ownership leading up the chain of command, this is one that we run into quite a bit. It's become very helpful for me in terms of thinking about the challenges we run into in coaching and leadership development, because in those relationships, they're high trust.
Yes.
We develop great rapport with these folks. They're willing to share an ungodly amount of information and opinions with us.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes those turn to grievances against the CEO,
Absolutely.
just to be frank. And so there was a situation recently where I was counseling one of our other advisors. He's like, hey, how would you handle this situation? And it was one where there was an issue where the CEO had acknowledged a need to change his behavior. And this individual was talking to one of our advisors and saying, yeah, he said that, but it's just a matter of time before he goes back to his old ways.
Yep.
And I said, well, here's where we need to challenge. We need to challenge that individual that his attitude here is actually a demonstration of his failure to lead.
Yes.
Because he's not willing to give the space. And the kind of backwardness of it is that he's actually creating the environment, which virtually guarantees he's going to get the behavior he doesn't want. The boss is going to relapse, and this is going to come back on him. And so we got into talking about this. We need to work on this individual, this leader in this organization, about leading up the chain of command.
Yes.
What can he do to serve that business owner? What can he do to create the space where that can change?
Yep.
What can he do to be the voice of encouragement and accountability, to your earlier point of like when it does go off the rails, like let's go ahead and let's not create the environment, but let's go ahead and commit now. We're going to show a little bit of grace and mercy when it does happen, and we're not going to let it slide.
Yeah.
We're going to hold him accountable to that. We're going to remind him that this is something we both agreed he needs to work on. And if we have leaders, like this is what I think every leader should, it's the uncomfortable thing they should desire, which is, am I going to raise up a group of leaders underneath me that are going to lead up the chain of command, point out my blind spots, but also like take responsibility for giving me the right information to greenlight the big things that they do want to do.
Yeah.
Willink talks a lot about that in the book of, dealing with his superiors. And if we got a mission, we didn't get a mission approved, that's on us. We need to do a better job next time of laying out the case, providing the details, doing the advance work. And rather than sit here and complain and moan about the fact they won't let us do anything, let's own it. And I know you and I talk about this a lot. At the moment we'll own something, now we have agency over it to make change.
Yes. Yep.
If you're in a leadership role and there's total areas where you're like, that's not my responsibility, you've just handed over the keys to do anything about it.
Yes.
And none of us want that.
Yeah.
But I think the way we talk to ourselves, the way we think about situations, that's really what we're doing. And we're painting ourselves into a box that we're not going to be able to get out of. And we hand somebody else the brush and say, I don't know. It's, nothing I can do.
Yeah. As soon as you step into leadership, you become responsible for the environment. The environment is the things in the environment are your responsibility. That's like what you just said. It's like saying to an alcoholic, oh, as you're bringing the beer in the house, he's just going to go ahead. He's probably going to just start drinking again like a crazy, and it's like, well, you're enabling. Yeah. You're enabling that environment. So you change. You make the adjustments. You make sure you go the extra mile and make sure that stuff's taken care of. Another thing that I love this is probably one of my favorite things that I love talking with leaders about are systems. You're always going to fall to the strength of your systems. If you don't have good systems, and I see people with time management, all these things, everything we talked about today can have a system. Do you get a haircut every month? It's a system. Do you how do you read? Do you listen? When do you do that? Oh, I just don't have time. Really? What's 30 minutes? 2% of your day? Is that what that is? You can plan ahead for it. Plan ahead, have the audio picked out ahead of time. Don't be sitting in your car scrolling, trying to figure out, have it picked out ahead of time. Have your book by your bed so that you read it, or maybe your desk or whatever. You should always have systems. What's crazy to me is some guy, I'll talk to him and he'll has a whole system for making his lunch the night before. His lunch, that is prepared. He's got his snacks, he's got his thermos, he's got all this stuff prepared, has no idea what he's doing the next day. But he uses the skill sets that we have already. He just needs to adapt them to work.
That's interesting, yeah.
And how many conversations have we had, Joey, where I was talking to someone yesterday I got an email about, hey, what do you use for org charts? And we have a tool for that. Hey, had a conversation. These 3 guys need to learn these things, and I need to take 3 hours of my time to train each one of them individually. And I said, why? What makes you think that's productive? Well, I need to do this. Are you teaching them all the same thing? Yeah, I'm teaching them all the same thing. Okay. Well, did you ever think of doing it and recording a video of you doing it, like on a Loom, and then giving it to them and say, hey, watch this, and then you're coming in the next day and you're doing it? And he was like, I can do that? Yes, you can do that. Right?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with someone else about they were doing a training. They needed to teach somebody how to fix something. And 5 of their guys didn't know how to fix it. And I said, are you recording yourself doing this? He's like, no, I was just going to do 3 different sessions of it. That's fine. But record it and put it in the archives. And then when you hire someone new, have them watch that video so that they're prepared, and then have them come in and fix it. Mm-hmm. So that you're multiplying your time. So everyone loves hacks. Somebody will sit there, they'll watch Instagram, and there's a video of how to wrap your fruit so your fruit doesn't go bad quickly. There's the dumbest hacks that we have in life, but there's hacks that you can have for your job, for your business, and that's what we love doing. At Axiom, we love tools.
Yeah.
We have tools.
Yeah. We have clients that they pay us, they invest quite heavily to have us work with them inside their business, and sometimes I feel like the thing that they're most excited about is the $19.99 per month subscription service. They were like, hey, this will do this for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh. But if you don't know, like that tool is probably going to save them $30,000 this year.
Yeah.
Right. For a $250 investment. If you don't know that it's out there, you're going to spend the $30,000.
Yes.
And so another tool that I'll mention, and this might be a hack, if you're a leader, one of the things that we would expect of you at Axiom, that we will hold you accountable to, is you need to be having one-to-ones with your individual direct reports that you're responsible for their success every single month.
Yeah.
And I get more pushback on this than you would expect, because you're going to spend 1 to 2 hours with the people who have the most responsibility in your business once a month to do 2 things. Find out how they're doing, and find out what your job is for them over the next 30 days.
Yep.
You get pushback because, I've got 6 direct reports. So you're saying I got to find 12 hours potentially in the next month, and then every month thereafter? I mean, just look at my calendar. Next week, I've got 2 hours of white space, and say, okay, here's what we'll do. Go out 3 months, right? And you go out, you sit behind them and they're using their Outlook or whatever. You go out 3 months, there's all kinds of white space. Like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to find the white space, and we're going to book that now. We're going to go into each one of those appointments. I'm pretty sure there's white space ahead of this for the next, infinity.
Yeah.
And we're just going to make those recurring every month. You're going to meet with so-and-so on the first Monday, so-and-so on the second Monday, so-and-so on the third Monday. Understood. You have vacations, they have vacations. You're going to have to reschedule, but this is the autopilot. And you go, wow, what's the difference? The difference is the ones who will do that, about 70% of them are still going to be, 70, 80% are still going to be meeting 6 months from now, having missed 1 or 2 meetings for rescheduling. Those that are waiting for the white space to show up, never gets done. They might do it for 1 month and just grit their teeth and move stuff around and squeeze it in where they have to, but it's not sustainable. So there's, to your point, there's a system, there's a process, there's a tool to help you, get the things done that are different from the things you used to have to do as now that you're in this leadership role. But, when you were in the field, you had, whether it was Snap-on tools or the conference or the vendor coming in from the supply house who was like, hey, we got this great new thing that does press fit fittings, or we've got this new manometer that's going to help you measure pressure in systems faster. When you're in leadership, unless you're exposed to the environment where people are talking about those leadership tools and hacks, you're just not going to come across them. So you have to run in those circles. You got to read those books. You got to, bring in the folks like Axiom that are always constantly looking for the best leadership tools, the best tricks, the best systems and processes. Yeah. And then you commit to use them. You wouldn't spend $800 on a Snap-on tool and then just let it sit in your toolbox. Exactly. You're going to use it just for the only reason, like, I got to feel like I'm getting some use out of this. Yeah. And then you become proficient with it. There comes a day where you're like, if it broke today, I'd go spend $900 tomorrow because I got to have it.
Yeah. So each of the things we talked about today, Joey, are going to help these leaders emerge. They're going to have to go through change. They're going to have to adapt. They're going to get out of their comfort zone. They're going to have to ask a lot of questions. They're going to have to go through this process. But again, it is a process. And that's what everyone needs to understand. Everything we talked about in this series, laborers to leaders, it is a process. And they have to embrace that process. They have to be able to go, okay, every day in every way I'm getting better and better. Like, I'm not doing everything perfectly. I am not where I want to be, but I'm not where I was. I'm moving forward. I'm progressing, because that's the biggest thing that people want to feel, progression. They want to feel that progression. What that leader was telling me about when that kid cut his hair, it's progression. They're getting better. The best, one of my favorite stories recently that I have is that, all of these things coming together. I have a leader that he really trained up his team, trained up his sales team, and he prioritized what you talked about, those one-on-ones. And everything started going in a really positive direction. Sales started going up. Everything started moving. And then the next month, the leads in the company dropped. The leads that were coming through the sales funnel dropped. However, he had been training his guys on following up 2 months previously, and he'd been doing one-on-ones, and he'd been spending time, and he'd been investing time that he wasn't doing previously. And all of a sudden, the leads start to drop, but the follow-ups started kicking in. And now the sales are continuing to climb, even though everything else started to drop, because the leader took personal responsibility months ago, and now it's starting to change. And you know what? Those guys that he's investing in, they are seeing what he's doing. And if at some point that guy, that leader wants to bring one of these sales guys or one of the people out in the trucks into the leadership team, they have a tremendous example to look to, because that leader, I'm talking to the business owners here in the leadership team, the time you invest with these people is going to determine how successful that they are. It's going to make a massive, massive impact. Every time you're with someone, you're investing in them, and you have to look at it like that. You're not just spending an hour with someone on your calendar. You are making a strategic investment in that person, and how well are you investing is the question.
Very well said. I think that's the spot where I just don't say anything else and let that be the thing that people sit with. Well, great 3 series. If you're jumping in and you're on the third of 3, go back and listen to the first 2. It'll give you a lot of context for everything that we've been talking about so far. And we would love for you to grow your leadership development capacity. We'd also love to help develop your team's leadership capacity. One of the things that we should talk about in a future episode is what CEOs need to be doing to increase their own leadership capacity. Yes. We get leaned on a lot to develop the leadership team. We also have a tier of service where our primary responsibility is not just that, but also making sure that the CEO, the successors to the CEO, they are leveling up their leadership capacity, which can look a lot different. And so we would encourage you, like Mike said, invest in leadership. It's something that continues to compound and compound. And if you don't, what's going to happen is your top performers are probably going to leave. And then now you've lost the investment you've put into your production resource, and you've lost a potential future leader. So we don't want that to happen. If we can help in any way, we would love to do that, come alongside your team. in this series, we've made a point of really leaning on the leadership guide that accompanies every single episode that we do of this podcast. The leadership guide is going to succinctly cover everything we've talked about: books, resources, tools that we've mentioned. The links are going to be there, but also it's in a format that you can use with your team. You can use self-study. You can use it in a lunch and learn to help bring some of these principles to your team. And you guys can internally begin to develop your own kind of leadership growth and development. Also, we believe at Axiom that a small business ought to change the world around it, but that doesn't happen in a vacuum. We need people hearing this message, working on this message, talking and doing the things that we're talking about on this podcast for it to make a difference. So like, subscribe, review the podcast, refer it to a friend, go to the website, subscribe to the Leadership Guide. That way you'll get it. Every single episode, it'll just show up in your email. And you can forward the Leadership Guide to people and say, here's a taste of what Axiom's doing. Think it could be helpful in you growing your business. Until next week, lead with purpose and grow with vision. That's what we talk about here at Axiom. That's kind of our mantra, and that's what we want for you.